Oh friends, how many review videos I have seen about this thing, and these reviews are more or less like this. Look, everything works. There is feedback, everything is good. Here, the steering wheel responds, well, no one talks about the void in the center, how it actually feels, that the steering power drops significantly when you use it, that you constantly have to look for some workarounds and so on and so forth. I am generally against this thing. But just recently on the stream, we finally found more or less normal settings, and it was already playable. Using Gran Turismo 7 as an example, and I have the Moza R12 base, I will try to explain and show everything as briefly as possible without fluff. But if this information is not enough for you and you want to dive deeper, there will be a link to the stream in the description where we tested all of this, where we finally, thanks to a subscriber, thank you very much, found more or less playable settings, because without settings, playing this was just a complete mess. I wouldn't recommend it, but now everything has changed a bit. So let's go in order. If anyone doesn't know, you are on the Kus-Kus Racing channel. And let's start with the fact that this thing supports not only Moza bases, you can also ride on Thrustmaster bases which have, for example, support for PC or Xbox or purely PC. The Logitech base is old there, and even the Hori racing wheel. Also, Simagic supports it too, but Simagic seems to have its own gadget, its own emulator, and they say it even works a bit better than this Brook. But before using it, be sure to first visit the website, definitely open the device compatibility tab and find your combination. For example, I use Fanatec V3 pedals and I have a Moza steering wheel, and I can't, even though there are 2 slots here, connect my base with the steering wheel to one slot and connect some random pedals to the other slot. The pedals must also be Moza, and this is the first very significant and notable issue. Be sure to absolutely and definitely visit the website, check compatibility, because if you have pedals and a base from different ecosystems, this thing indeed won't work at all. Make sure to first go and look for the list of your devices that you are using. Next, the second point. If you are using direct drive bases like Moza or Simagic, these bases often receive new updates and new firmware. Some Logitech, Thrustmaster, they rarely update their devices. So, with the latest firmware on Moza, nothing will work for you. Steering wheel will be recognized. It will connect, you will be able to navigate the menu, but left will be right, right will be left, and you definitely won't have any feedback, and you will need to revert back your Moza base to a previous version of the firmware, or alternatively, I will leave a hyperlink in the video description for an unofficially updated version that was created by someone on Reddit community, since the official version, which is the latest software update for this particular device, is from February 2024. However, I personally took the risk and installed this firmware. Everything functioned perfectly fine without any issues. The steering wheel was immediately recognized by the system and started working. Therefore, if you encounter this issue, there's a hyperlink provided in the description to download the most recent firmware update available. Additionally, here is a brief digression on the topic regarding the numerous times I was informed during the live stream that there is a new firmware update available that completely eliminating dead zone issues at center point, which seemed like nonsense initially, yet decided doing review because had already heard multiple people mentioning some new update removing central dead zones, main issue with emulator itself. Then checked website, finding only recent release dated February same year, exactly matching previous test runs conducted using Moza R3 while testing wheels supporting Xbox officially. Used thing thinking what changed? Nothing really did change. Who are these individuals constantly claiming something novel exists? Someone hears rumor somewhere, then starts exaggerating it beyond proportion. But maybe they were referring to this unofficial firmware that I mentioned, but I installed it and the void in the center remained as it was, and will remain for you too. The main problem with this device is that this device emulates all wheels as Logitech. I don't understand why, because it's Logitech and not the new Logitech, some direct drive, but specifically the old Logitech models that use gears specifically. These motors have a constant dead zone in the center of their operation. It is exactly and precisely said that this is precisely why all these problems and issues with the dead zone occur. And it is unclear why they cannot make the steering emulate the same as the Fanatec DD Pro, for example. For me, this is some kind of mystery, and the last update for this product was in February 2024. Well, damn, it seems to me they have neglected it. The third point you should know is the correctness of the connection, because I was racing on stream, and at one point the steering wheel turned off. It works. But in the game, On PlayStation, nothing happens after a while. I was told that this is indeed the latest firmware version available at the moment. It happens quite often, but no, currently. I then raced for approximately about 2 hours in online races, and my steering wheel did not turn off even once. I think the correctness of the connection is simply important. Look, you take the USB, plug it into your PlayStation 5, and everything lights up here. Next, as the second step, you simply turn on your Moza base, and while the USB base is already on, you just insert it here into port number 1. Then basically everything starts working. It's just that if the sequence is different, these problems may potentially arise. For example, when I connected it, I first plugged it in here, and only then did I turn on the Moza base. Perhaps that's why my steering wheel turned off. But I personally drove online for an hour and a half to 2 hours and nothing disconnected. But in any case, something might go wrong. I want to convey the idea that there will be conclusions about this thing in the end. Yes, you can drive. I drove yesterday, even enjoyed it, and it seems I already forgot about the empty center with certain settings. That's it, you can race quite well. But, guys, be ready that something can always happen. And you will have to go to the forum, to Reddit, and dig around there to find a solution to your problem. This can definitely happen. That's why these are just band-aids, and it's a constant hassle. Next, the fourth point you should know is that there is a slight delay. Just take a camera with slow motion. Start turning the wheel and record it on your phone to see if the wheel in the game keeps up with your movements. But the delay is not critical if you set the right settings. That is, if you initially set it to 900 degrees and race at 900 degrees, it can be quite unpleasant. However, with my settings, well, the settings that were given to me, the delay is not critical. It won't significantly affect your driving. But keep in mind, there is a slight delay, but it exists. Well, and probably the last thing I would like to say before we move on to the settings is that I will show you an example of how it all works. Fifth, it's definitely the force feedback. Keep in mind that I have a Moza R12, but at the same time my power has significantly dropped by half. It feels like I'm riding on some Moza R5 base. I understand that my settings have the base set to 100%. Here in this block, everything is also turned up to the maximum. There is a setting here that increases the force feedback, and it's already at maximum. It adds more strength, you understand. And despite all this, I still drive. I understand, well, this is not the power of the Moza R12. That is, at some point it is really sharp, but no. I know that my base is definitely, absolutely, and significantly more powerful. And with this little adapter, I feel like the force feedback of your steering wheel just drops by half. So think about that too. But again, this is all based on my Moza R12. Be on the Moza R5, the maximum force feedback won't be cut as significantly. Honestly, I can't help you here. My 12 Newton meters feel like they have turned into 6. Before moving on to the tests in the game, it is absolutely very important. This is very important. Only with these settings was I comfortable playing Gran Turismo, because without them I was frustrated and still wanted to drive. Of course, for some time I thought maybe I would get used to it, but I would hardly get used to such a huge dead zone in the center. But what do? Steering angle in the game is 540. Yes, it will be a bit uncomfortable in some cars that have a very high steering angle, but yours will be reduced. But this is the thing about helps you minimize delay. Next, surface sensitivity 10, game feedback 100, steering rotation speed 50, mechanical feedback 50, software feedback 50%. Advanced feedback 100, steering stabilization enabled, stabilization 2800, and I don't know. It probably got messed up because it should be 1100. It should be set to 2800 like this. I don't know where it came from. Next, of course, inertia 200%, mechanical friction 20%, speed damping 60%, and speed damping at 120 km/h. 50% speed damping creates 120 km/h. With these settings, you might also be able to tweak things a little bit more to adjust slightly in your settings to make your gameplay more comfortable and to enhance your experience. Next, feedback is also important. You should set this kind of curve for feedback. I think you can also try out different options and maybe even make it better. And see what works best for you in your gameplay. As for the curves, I believe this parameter has almost reduced significantly the dead zone in the center to a minimum, almost completely. If you have a linear line, you can really feel that empty center, especially during turns, as if something in the center area is blocking your path in a noticeable way. You feel like you're hitting that dead zone during your gaming sessions. Guys, there will be some small inserts like this because I'm currently in the editing process and realize that some things need to be added as you navigate through the game and make necessary adjustments. So, I say that this curve eliminates the dead center and the knocking in the center. In fact, everything works very well on the GT3, but later in the video, you will see that when we take some super formula, a very fast car, this knocking hasn't gone anywhere. This dead center will still be there. Plus, I'll give you, well, you'll indeed hear it. I moved the microphone as close as possible so you can see and hear directly how it works really well. That is indeed, when turning through the center, there are these wildly annoying sounds. So, these settings don't work on all cars. On GT3, GT4, I think it will be perfectly fine, but on faster ones, in my opinion, it will not work effectively. You need to look for something of your own again. So this setting, look, you set the x-axis to 5% and the y-axis to 3%, and I think this is the main thing that helps reduce the dead zone in the center a bit. And additionally, the limitation of fixation here is really not important. With these settings, personally, I was quite comfortable playing, in my experience. Plus, on the actual track, there is a dead zone, feedback strength, also the steering angle there is plus or minus, but other than the feedback strength set to x10, which is the maximum, I didn't change anything else there, and there's really no need to change anything more. Initially, I drove differently. At first, I just set the game feedback and steering rotation to 100%. I turned off all these filters, mechanical feedback, software feedback, all this friction. I disabled all these filters completely. So I just have 100% power at the maximum of my base without any filters, smoothing and so on, and it doesn't work. It turned out to be a terrible option. However, when you play on PC in the same iRacing or ACC in a good simulator, you can just turn everything down to 0 and the steering works great. You don't really need to set any filters there because all these filters absolutely smooth out the feedback, but you actually lose quite a bit in its detail and overall sharpness. But in Gran Turismo, the feedback is very specific, so even on the Fanatec wheel with official support, I have the damper set to 35, turned up to 45 at maximum. Otherwise, you just can't drive. You drive, and the wheel just starts doing this by itself. It starts to jerk, and you have to hold it. Even in very fast cars, when you are holding the wheel, it tries to slip out of your hands. That's the peculiarity of the feedback in Gran Turismo. It really annoys me. So the faster the car, more damper I turn up, especially if it's some super fast car. Like, well, let's now take a look at everything in the game. Most important thing is that when you have everything connected correctly, and I remind you, first connect the Brook to the PlayStation, then connect the base to the Moza, and then plug the Moza itself into this. Brook, don't forget to carefully press the button on the wheel to activate the wheel or device. In my case, it's the S1 buttons, but you'll have to poke around with the buttons yourself to figure it out. So the wheel is definitely activated. Let's take a ride. See, the feedback is there. It appeared right away. And it's quite excellent. Not bad at all. And that's it. Basically, you can ride. Everything works great. And do you see how to identify the dead zone in the center? There. This is a typical phenomenon for Gran Turismo feedback. Even if you crank the damper hard, tightly applying various filters to the wheel, it will still wobble like this. But in our case, you see it doesn't wobble, it doesn't react at all because it's actually empty in the center. There will be a long straight here. Let's accelerate. So far the wheel is fine in the center. A little further from the center, see? This is how it should work in the center. And this is a normal phenomenon for it. But nothing happens if we keep the wheel strictly in the center. This precisely shows that very dead zone. But with these settings that I showed you, when you get used to it, I rode for about an hour and a half. And I no longer felt any dead zone in the center. And yes, you see our steering angle is slightly off. We have it set to 540, so I just turned the wheel a little. But it already has a much greater turn angle there. However, you also have to drive with a smaller steering angle. Otherwise, there will be a quite critical delay, in my opinion. And one more important thing, when setting up the wheel. You need to set the controller sensitivity to 7, although I don't understand how the controller and the wheel are related. I thought they were different things, but they say it's somehow connected. The maximum feedback torque is 5 and the feedback sensitivity is 7, but you might still need to play around with these settings because these are set for GT3 cars. I drove the Porsche GT3 yesterday and everything was quite good, but now with the Super Formula it's indeed impossible to drive with these settings. The shaking in the center is just devastating. Guys, I'll answer your question right away. Why do you complain that the base power seems to drop by half and at the same time in Gran Turismo settings the maximum feedback level is set to 5 instead of 10? It really feels like I cut the feedback myself, but in reality it's set to 5 because if you set it higher, the wheel just can't handle it. So, I'm driving over the curb and I don't feel the curb. This is called clipping. It's when you turn up too much power in the game, and the base can't deliver that power. This means it receives very high values. It tries to deliver all the power it can, but there isn't enough power, and therefore the same curb doesn't provide any vibrations or feedback because the base is already at its limit. I know what the Moza R12 is capable of. Sorry. But I have the Moza R12 on PC and Assetto Corsa Competizione set from 45 to 55%. And Assetto Corsa Competizione is very demanding on the base power. So I know what 12 Newton meters feel like. I know that 12 Newton meters is more than enough for me. I have enough power on the Fanatec DD Pro with 8 Newton meters in the game. I don't even set it to the maximum. That's why I'm telling you, Brook significantly cuts the initial power of your base as if by half. So you probably need to look for settings somewhere in various online forums or perhaps even experiment with different settings yourself and then apply them to achieve better performance for high-performance vehicles, because this is particularly important for Gran Turismo due to its unique feedback system, and explore different options. In the same Assetto Corsa Competizione on PlayStation or in other games, I think everything will be much better. In fast cars, this dead center is indeed felt much more. Faster your speed. The faster you accelerate, and here on the straight, I really feel the vibration significantly in the center of the wheel, whereas in GT3 cars, it's not as noticeably pronounced. The experience of driving was quite satisfactory, and it was enjoyable. However, when you are in faster cars, the sensation is felt very, very strongly and intensely. Now, with that being said, let us proceed to the next topic. Now I will move the microphone just a tiny bit more closer to you. Let's do it this way, shall we? I will turn off the game sound, move the microphone closer to you, and you can listen for yourself. Quiet, don't be scared if anything happens. The sounds are not that critical, it's just a very strong microphone amplification. Now we will speed up. I hope it will be audible now. Are you ready? I think you clearly heard that strong thumping in the steering wheel when I turned it through the center. All that, look, if the car is just standing still right, there is none. And this manifests itself specifically at speed. Moreover, the higher the speed, the faster the car, the more pronounced it all becomes. Oh, and here's the most interesting part. These are indeed the conclusions. By the way, I also drove with a very heavy steering wheel. That's probably why my feedback suffered quite a bit. This wheel weighs a lot. It's one of the heaviest wheels. So if you're driving with some Moza R5 and you have a light stock wheel, and if you also have a Formula style rim, then your wheel will be even lighter. You might not suffer as much as I do. And returning to the question of whether it's worth it, if you race on a computer and have a PlayStation, and you occasionally play Gran Turismo, then yes, it's definitely worth it. So if you race on a computer and sometimes, here the key word is sometimes, you race in Gran Turismo, it's worth it if you already have a Moza ecosystem or some other equipment that doesn't support PlayStation. And you can buy it and race without having to upgrade all your equipment. But if you are starting to get into sim racing and begin with Gran Turismo, you watched my videos, you got inspired, you want to race in Gran Turismo 2, or start a sim racing channel and immerse yourself in the Gran Turismo community, right? By no means. What the hell? You don't need this. It's constant workaround, constantly searching for some settings, and something can always go wrong for you. I think it's perhaps better to buy something like a Thrustmaster T300. The feedback might be a little worse than direct drive, but you won't have the hassle of constantly searching for settings. Answering Logitech G29 or Moza R5. Clearly Moza R5 will be better. After all, yes, or for him for 5 from this gadget, well of course Brain 5 will be better percentage. Some Thrustmaster T150, T248 with combined feedback. Or you have a gear and one belt. Well of course direct drive will be better. But if we compare Thrustmaster T300 and Moza R5 with this adapter, then I would prefer. I wouldn't compare TGT at all. Of course, TGT will, without a doubt, be better. Well, even better, of course, is some Fanatec DD Pro, right? A direct drive base with official support, where there's none of this hassle. Because, well, you see, sometimes the firmware update doesn't work. Sometimes you have to find settings, there's a dead center, and some other issues. But the most important thing, well, I clearly wanted to show you the most important thing, which is the dead center. So, I managed to get rid of it in GT3 cars. I drove yesterday, and I didn't feel that dead center at all. I somehow got used to it, and it doesn't feel noticeable. But with the same settings, we just take Formula 1, Super Formula, right, you know? And you heard how it works. It seems to me that you can easily ruin your wheel this way. But again, there might definitely be some settings for fast cars like Super Formula, but you just need to dig in, Tinker, and study this topic. But, to be honest, I don't really care for it. I was skeptical about this block. And it seems that the settings have improved, but what bothers me again is that some update, some firmware is being done by the users themselves, unofficially. And the last official firmware was from February 2024. And I don't understand why, I mean really honestly, why can't it be made so that you can choose which wheel it will emulate at all in any way, or perhaps somehow in some manner or another? So why the hell do I need emulation for Logitech when I have a direct drive wheel? There have been DD Pro wheels for a long time. Why don't you make it so that here you could choose which wheel it would emulate? Just set the DD Pro wheel emulation and that's it. There won't be a dead zone in the center and everything will work perfectly. But I'm not a developer, guys. I don't know. Maybe there are some complexities in this. Although Sigma, I think, is the name of some converter from C-Magic, specifically for C-Magic wheels. They managed to do it somehow. Why can't Brook do it? I don't know. In any case, share your thoughts and opinions and insights in the comments. Maybe someone has their own personal experience with this Brook and has found potential solutions to these issues. Feel free to engage in communication and discussions in the comments. Maybe someone can assist another person. Well, I just remind you that I will leave all the links for wheel settings and firmware in the description. Thanks to the guys from P1 Racing for generously providing the equipment, because again, with my pedals from Fanatec, nothing can be connected. And that's all for me, friends. This was indeed Kus. You were on the Kus-Kus Racing channel. Finally, I made a full video about this rig because I had it in the review of the Moza R5, where I spoke very poorly of it, because that was a long time ago, and back then it worked. Even worse. The feedback was much worse, and even the dead zone felt very much emptier. Then I tested it again on some stream, and when I actually released the review on the Moza R3, we tested it on the stream. Finally, it was indeed briefly mentioned everywhere, and thanks to you, you asked me for it. Here is a full video about this device. Well, you can draw your own conclusions for yourself. Goodbye for now.